Hey gang, I just wanted to take a few minutes and walk you through an example of a good educational outreach plan that has been done in a previous class in another semester to give you a better idea of what the expectations are and what I'm really looking for with these presentations. So as you can see here, this first slide, the student has just listed the survey questions they utilize for their surveys at the beginning of this research project. So that's what you're going to want to do here. You want to establish what were the questions that you used to determine how you were going to approach your educational outreach plan. What are the holes in the knowledge of this particular topic or event that you are exploring? So, as you see here for this next slide, the student has taken the responses that they received from their surveys and identified some general holes in the knowledge about their particular topic or event and come up with some learning objectives, some of the things they want to address through their educational outreach plan to respond to those holes in the knowledge and try to fill in those gaps. As you can see, this student also has identified what particular audience that their educational outreach plan is trying to reach, and the student is trying to reach a younger audience, say, middle to early high school, or maybe even elementary school to middle school age range here. So that's some things that you want to think about as you are using your survey questions to determine your learning objectives. What actually do you want people to get out of your educational outreach plan and your digital exhibit proposal? Now this next section begins the bulk of this student's presentation here, and this is where you're going to want to do some outside research and find some sources to provide you with the context and the information that you need to address those gaps in the knowledge about the particular topic or event that you are exploring. Now, of course, this student chose the Pueblo Revolt in New Mexico during the period of Spanish colonization in the 17th century as their topic. And this student, as you see, has provided some detailed information about the lead up to the revolt, the players in the revolt itself, of course, and they have addressed through this some of those holes that they have identified and those learning objectives that they have identified through this process. So again, this is where you're going to want to do some outside research to really find out everything you need to know about this event so that you can then educate others about this particular topic or event that you are exploring here. So one of the things that you need to think about as you're putting together your presentation is the digital exhibit proposal aspect of this. So some of the things that you're going to want to do, and as you can see that this student has done, is find some images and artifacts to go along with your presentation. As you see, the student has a map of New Mexico here. On this slide, the student has a image of the actual conflict here. This is another image of some Spanish interaction with some Pueblo Indians. Here you have a Pueblo Indian holding the knotted cord, which according to the story of the Pueblo Revolt was how the Pueblo Indians counted down the days leading up to the revolt. The student also has a example of a statue here of the revolt leader Pope that is in Washington, D.C. So these are all things that you need to think about and search for and include in your presentation, and of course those things can also be included in your digital exhibit. Now another thing to think about, and something that this student did, is your actual presentation itself and the some of the things that you can use to enhance that presentation that can also be utilized for the digital museum exhibit that you also is a part of this plan here. So on this slide here, the student actually in their presentation actually utilize an example of a ceremonial mask of the Pueblo Indians. Now this was something that he recreated himself using materials, but it was just an example of what that mask would have looked like. Now you don't have to go quite that far as to manufacture artifacts on your own. An image of the artifact that you were referring to in your presentation would work just fine, but actual artifacts themselves, if you can bring those in for your presentation, also again further enhance the overall quality and impact of your presentation as well. Another thing here on this slide that you see the knotted cord, the student actually had a knotted cord and used it to explain exactly how the Pueblo Indians used that for the revolt itself. Here in this slide, you see this student is talking about an actual recipe that is a Pueblo recipe that is called Pope after the leader of the Pueblo revolt, and is a recipe utilizing squash, and the student actually had a actual squash that they used as an artifact to discuss and show during their presentation. So those are all things that you can think about as well. What are some items, what are some images that can be utilized in a museum-like exhibit setting that can enhance the story that you are telling? One other thing that you should be thinking about as well is how are you going to measure or determine the effectiveness of your educational outreach plan and your digital exhibit proposal. And what this student has done here is they have created a Kahoot. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Kahoot. It is a multiple choice kind of quiz sort of app or program that has been utilized in middle schools and high schools for quite a few years now. So I'm sure most of you are somewhat familiar with this. And this student has put together a Kahoot that has questions drawn directly from the information provided in their presentation. And this is something that people that the educational outreach plan has reached can utilize to determine how well they retain their knowledge. Now you don't necessarily have to do a Kahoot, but think about some things that you could possibly do to address how well your outreach plan has reached its audience. So I'm looking for some creativity here. Think about various apps or programs you can use, or activities, or anything of that nature. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an online type situation like a Kahoot or something like this. It could be an activity that you designed, or some sort of project thing, maybe a scavenger hunt type thing, or the possibilities are endless, and I'm looking for some creativity there. So think about those things as well as you are working through your project. As you can see here, for the final slide, the student has listed their sources that they use to gain their information for their project. And as you see, there are a variety of different sources that the student has used here. The student used the actual lecture from the class in which this project was presented. They utilized the textbooks that were used for that particular semester's class. They have actually utilized the PuebloIndian.org website for some information there, a couple of YouTube videos, their AP US History Study Guide. There are a variety of different sources the student has used here, and there are a variety of different ways that you can, and places you can go to find sources. I have included in the research project folder some links to some JCC library history databases that can be excellent research assistance for your purposes here. Google, of course, can be your friend. You do have to be careful with any sort of online search engines, though, that the sources that they bring up are legitimate academic or scholarly resources there. Usually anything with a .edu suffix comes from a college or a university is usually a pretty safe bet. Most online encyclopedias are also pretty safe. You do have to stay away from Wikipedia, though. That is generally not an acceptable resource to use because of its open platform nature and the fact that anybody can go in and edit that stuff. There's often a lot of misinformation within Wikipedia articles, so you do want to steer clear of Wikipedia. And of course, if there's any questions at all in your mind about some of the sources that you are finding, about whether they are useful or legitimate resources, of course you can always reach out to me, and I can help you determine the usefulness of whatever sources you find there and whether it would be something that could be used for this project. One last point I want you to think about as you are putting together your project and preparing your presentation is your overall sort of approach to your presentation. Now, what is the purpose of this? And I want you to imagine that you are presenting this proposal to, say, a museum board of directors or governors or something like that, to try to convince them that your exhibit ideas are useful and good and they should establish your exhibit in their museum. So that is what is meant by this outreach plan and this digital exhibit proposal. You don't actually have to come up with the exhibit itself, just the proposal for the exhibit. What are some images you can use? What are some artifacts you can use? Of course, what is the story you were trying to tell? What is the information about this topic that fills in those gaps in the historical knowledge of the general public? So as you are putting together your PowerPoint, as you're preparing your presentation, that's kind of the approach. That's the mindset that you should sort of be in and thinking about as you are putting this thing together and, of course, preparing to actually present your ideas to the class and, of course, to me. Well, I think that about covers it, gang. I hope this little presentation here has answered some of your questions about this project and this presentation and how you should approach it. If not, as always, I am here to help. Please reach out to me if you have any questions or concerns whatsoever. So until next time, as always, study hard, and I'll see you soon.